Happy Thursday, rock lovers. Are you ready to learn something new? So, welcome to tonight, Cat and Chat. My name is Giovanna Morales from Highland Park's marketing team, and thank you for joining us. Tonight, Zeke will be teaching us tried and tested strategies on how to prepare and set up for rock and gem shows. With years of experience in joining rock and gem show, Zeke will be sharing tips from planning to selecting piece to sell, display arrangement, and more. Whether you are a gem show veterans or thinking of joining your first one, we hope that you take away actionable strategies that you can implement on your own. And if you're new here to our live event, or if you just want to say hi, please drop something on the chat so we can acknowledge you. Hi, Catherine, Chris, Ed, James, Rodney, Lawrence, Kim, welcome. Daniel. Yep, we would also like to invite everyone watching us online to join us here in our VIP Zoom room by signing up using the link you are seeing. So before we get this cat and chat on the road, here's a short video to give you a preview of what we have in store for you tonight. We're super excited to get this cat and chat started, so let's dive in right into some guidelines. There are two ways to ask your questions. First, you can put your question on the chat. The chat box can be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Make sure to send your chat to everyone so we can see them. A member of HPL team will read your question to speak out loud. For those who are watching on Facebook, you can enter your question on the comment section and someone from HPL team will read your question to see. Second, to make this cat and chat more interactive, you can ask your question to seek yourself. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a button that says reactions. Click on that button and you will see an option that says raise hand. When you raise your hand, a member of HPL will unmute you and you will receive a prompt saying that the host is asking you to unmute. Click on unmute and you will be able to ask your question. As you After your question, ask your question, you will lower your hand and mute you so the next person in the line can ask his or her question. And if you have a question later on during the show, you can raise your hand again. We will be alternating unmuting people and asking questions from the chat so everyone gets a fair chance for their question to be answered. And for the Wheel of Fortune giveaway, if the initial winner isn't here, we will respin the wheel until a winner who is present in the room is selected. So to officially start tonight, Cat and Chat, please welcome our master showman, Sid Dalrymple.
Good evening, y'all. It's so great to be here with you. And tonight it's nice. I'm home at a reasonable hour. It's only 7 p.m. Normally I don't see my apartment till like 1 a.m. So I came in and I was like, oh, sun comes through those lights earlier. So it's shocking. Hey, Ed. So it'll just be me tonight. We're gonna be talking a little bit about setting up for shows, things to plan for. I know that's a fancy title. Y'all come up with some fun names. We'll be looking at pictures, and Joanna dug up some photos that look like they're from 1985. They're from a few years ago of John's setup. So I'm excited. We're gonna show you guys those too. So that'll be exciting. And then we can harass John about it tomorrow. That's awesome, James. There is a lot that people don't realize they need to prepare for. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Any questions before we get started? All right. Well, one of the things I really wanted to start with, and I think we might break this up into multiple nights where we talk about this again. But I wanted to talk about the focus, the focus of what you do. Um, I'll pick on my dad a little bit. When he does shows, I've heard comments of, it looks like someone brought an entire junk store to a trade show and set it up, because there's so much clutter that it makes it hard to see what's going on, and people are not attracted to clutter. Clutter does not make people want to go, I want to see what's going on over there. So your booth should be beautiful. You should be focused on one thing or a very small group of things. You shouldn't try to do everything, because if you try to do everything, you'll wind up bringing this crazy amount to the show. It'll be very hard to set up. You won't do as good because, when I actually just to change for a second. When I changed from doing a little bit of everything to focused on cabochons, my business more than doubled at the next show. And every show after that for a year, it just doubled every time because I got away from having a little bit of everything and a lot of cabochons. And one of the other things that did for me to make my booth more attractive is when I had 10,000 cabs laid out on a table or multiple tables, it made it more attractive because people are like, wow, that's, it's very eye-catching to see that many cabs laid out in one space. So that was a big help. So that's the first thing I'll caution you on. Focus on something. Don't try to do everything. Find what you want to do, find what you like, find what you're good at, focus on that, do it well. You don't need to please everybody. You need to please the market that you're chasing. So for me, when I was doing shows, cabochons were my main focus. And after I grew cabochons to the point where it was working really well, I decided to then add in spheres where I was cutting. And it worked out really well because I could buy a big chunk of rough rock, cut the ball out of it, sell the sphere, more than pay for the rock, and then I had all the small pieces that I could use for cabbing. So it worked out really well to do it that way. So that's what I wanted to talk about as well, is if you're doing multiple things, pick things that work well together. If you're cutting cabochons, you could also sell slabs. Slabs are a really good seller. You can do cabochons, you can sell jewelry, maybe people want to make their own, you make the cabs and you make the jewelry, you can do that. That's a very good combination. The only area that I don't like is doing rough rock. I used to do shows where I'd take rough rock, and it will kill your back to take a few tons of rock to every show you do. So I never advise anybody to do shows with rough rock. It's a lot of work. The only way that you can really make that work is if you're setting up at the big shows and you're taking, a forklift to move stuff around. Because if you're doing it bucket by bucket, you'll see those old guys walking to the shows, they're all hunched over and they're carrying their 50th bucket into the show. And it's not fun. So I would not recommend focusing on rough rock, although if you did do rough rock, slabs is going to be a good addition to that. And I was actually thinking about this. If I could start all over and only pick one thing, slabs is probably the first thing I would start taking to shows. Because you can buy, a nice chunk of rough rock, slab the whole thing up, and do well selling it slab by slab. And it's a minimal amount of effort on your part. A lot of people go crazy deep. Personally, I would just do bins of unpolished slabs. I'd buy a chunk of rough rock, I would slab it up, wash it, stick it in a bin with a price on it, and let people dig through the bins of the slabs. I think that's a great business model, and I've seen a lot of people succeed really well doing just slabs. The problem with doing something, I have not checked my email yet, Ed. I'll check it after we're done tonight. The problem with doing, like cabochons, for instance, is if you don't get your production really well, you spend a lot of time. Some people, it takes them an hour to make one cab, and you're not going to do well unless you're doing really high-end pieces and selling them at a quick rate. So that's one of the things to consider is how quick of a return are you getting for your effort. If it takes you, 3 hours to do something and you only made $5, but you really lost money. So that's why I promote the wet belt sander so much. It's because for me, it changed how fast I could cut cabs significantly. Made it so I could cut a lot faster, and that's why I love that machine so much. So that's the first thing. Pick a focus, figure out what you're gonna do and how you're gonna do it well, and then be the best at it. The other thing that I think all businesses should have, whether it's just a hobby business or something that you're pushing to grow as your main focus, is a mission. When I did shows, I would tell people my focus is to provide good quality cabochons at the best price I can and the highest quality I can. It depends, Daniel. I actually would have a range of stones. So if I had let's say I'd already been doing shows for a year and I had a tray of stones that I had just barely finished. This is the first show that I was showing them at. I'd be pretty firm on the price. If someone was buying in bulk, I may give them a better price. But if they were just picking one at a time, I'd be pretty firm on the price. And honestly, most people really didn't negotiate a lot at the shows that I did. Most people would just come up and pick out the cabochons they want and then check out. A lot of people really don't like to negotiate. Um, some do. Some people love to negotiate, and that they get a lot of joy out of that. I think you'll find that most people at shows in the US do not love to negotiate. They find it uncomfortable, hard, and inconvenient. So I try to price stuff uh fairly well. Uh I like to negotiate too, but I know a lot of people don't. And there's actually two price models where some people will price their stuff to negotiate and some people will price their stuff to this is the best price I can give you. So that's something that you have to decide before you price your stuff. Excuse me, is how you're gonna interact with people about it. So if I had a tray of cabochons that I just barely cut and I knew they were gonna sell really well, I'd be pretty firm on the price. If I had cabochons that everybody had picked through and they got all the ones that they really liked and there was a handful left, I may give them 50% off just so I don't have to take them to the next show. A lot of people get hung up on losing money on something. So like that's why John talks about you'll see the same stuff at the same shows for 10 years. It'll be the where John talks about go down to the petrified wood log, take a left. That's really what he's saying with there is you're actually losing money by taking it to the shows over and over and over again because you could be showing something new. You could stop paying yourself to haul it around, and it feels so good to get rid of it. So if you have something that's not selling well, you've sold all the best pieces, you're better off to just get rid of it. If you can sell it at cost, that's great. But you're better to get rid of it than to keep holding on to it and doing it again. Now I'll show you some pictures of my cabochons. But because I did do them all based on weight. I would figure out what they cost me and how much I was going to sell them for based on the gram weight. So if I had, if I have a big pile of cabochons, I'm going to sit down and I'm not even going to look at the cabochons. I'm just going to price them based on the gram weight. Now, if there's, A grade and B grade in there, I will sort those before I price them. But I'm going to determine those prices beforehand. And then when I do it, and I should give credit where credit's due. Hannah actually did most of the sticker pricing for me. She was amazing that way. So, but I would price every cabochon, put a little sticker on the back with the price. On the cabochons, I cut the majority of them. I would buy collections, or if I found a good deal, like you see John selling cabochons on the live sale, I'd buy cabochons like that and put them out as well. Um, but so I had a mix of both stuff that I cut and stuff that I had bought. And I think that's a good way to mix it too, because it's hard to it's hard to do every part of the business. No, I do not, Robert. If it's a more affordable material that is not translucent, I probably won't polish the back of it, or I won't put a high gloss on it. I'll give it a little polish so it doesn't have saw marks in it. Um, Most people do not care if the back's polished. If people are doing higher end pieces, they will care. So that's something that you have to determine is what's your demographic. Are you cutting cabs that are going to be $100 for every cab, or are you cutting a bunch of $10 cabs? If you're cutting a bunch of $10 cabs, those people are not going to care if the back's polished. If you're polishing cabs that are 100, 150, $250, they will care, and it will affect the value quite a bit if the back is polished. One of the other things that I would do to speed up the production, if as I'm doing a batch of agate cabochons, I may grind them all out on 80, then do 220, make sure they look good, and I might put them in the vibratory tumbler to finish them so that I can do a large batch of cabochons at once. Not every cabochon I would hand finish all the way through the entire process. So it's another way to speed up your process. And it's going to affect the value, but you have to pick the demographic you're going for. And one way you can do that is you can look at what shows that you will be going to and what are these people buying. For me, I didn't, when I talk about I cut a lot of ring stones, that's not something I really decided. I took a bunch of large cabochons to shows and had a bunch of people tell me, wow, I wish you had this material small enough for a ring stone, because it's just too big for what I want. And I heard that so many times that I sold off all the big cabs and I started cutting all ring stones, or the majority of ring stones, and my business went way up. So that was now my market, is that people wanted ring stones, so that's what I'm focusing on. So you may not get to decide some things like that. As a general rule, Mike, if you can put it on your pinky and it doesn't look too big, that's kind of how I determine ring stone size. Or another metric you could use is dime size or less. Some people get a little bit more creative with what a ring stone is. Like my stepmother, she wears huge rings, but Hannah wears tiny rings. So it's subjective what's considered a ring stone. But as a rule of thumbs, I would say dime size or less. Yes, lapidary shows are very different across the country. Um, in Utah, for instance, I could get much better prices than I would see on like East Coast shows. It's because there's more rock collectors there. There's not as many pretty rocks out in the wilderness on the East Coast compared to Utah or anywhere on the West Coast, actually. And so there's going to be more people into it, which means there's more demand for that, and so it drives the price up. On pricing slabs, so that's actually one of the things that we're going to talk about is pricing. A lot of people think if I pay $1 for it and I sell it for $2, I'm doing good. But what most people, especially when they're getting started, forget to factor in is the cost of doing business. So there's really three main areas that you have to think about what your cost is. The cost of buying the rock, so your materials, your cost of, processing it. You got to cut it, clean it, put it in something to take to a show, drive it to a show, you're using your gas, and then you've got to make a profit. The other thing that a lot of people forget about is taxes. You're gonna pay taxes on this stuff, especially if you sell a lot of stuff, and that is always more than you think it is. Another thing that I've discovered a lot of people aren't aware of just doing shows is sales tax. You have to collect sales tax and pay sales tax. Yeah, Uncle Sam wants his unfair share. So you got to account for that. And so I think a lot of people, when they're pricing things, forget all of the costs. So I would, as a general rule, I would mark things up at least 3 times. So if I pay a dollar for it, I'm selling it for $3. It generally will cover your costs with a small amount of profit. And there's another thing to consider when you're pricing stuff. Do you want to price things higher and get a better margin and move them slower? Or do you want a lower margin and sell them faster? Because I could take a cabochon and maybe I can get $100 for it. It's a nice cabochon, but may take a few shows for me to sell it for $100. Well, if I sell it for $50 and I still make a profit and it sells the first show I take it to, that can be a better model because cash flow is very important. You won't always want cash coming into your business. If there's no cash coming in, it kind of brings your business to a halt. It makes it very uncomfortable and painful to sell stuff. Jimmy, I find that people would rather be charged $40 with a 25% off than just pay the $30. So I actually originally I had gone to a model where I was very stern on pricing. I didn't I figured out exactly what it cost me and exactly what I needed to make on it. And people always wanted a deal on the stuff, and I couldn't give them a deal, so they would tend not to buy it as often. But if I raised the prices a little bit, and if I would, most of the time I was only given 10% off. Um, People would still rather have that 10% off than just pay it the same rate up front. It's a psychological I have to get a good deal on this, or I feel like I have to get a good deal on this to be able to buy it. So I definitely think you should price your stuff with wiggle room to be able to give people a discount. In the beginning, I didn't give people any discount, and I got to the point where I was actually wholesaling. I could cut enough cabochons and had enough cabochons coming in that I could sell them. Yeah, and that's a good point. Cutting, you got to account for that time. So if you're cutting earring sets that take longer to cut, then it actually you need to charge more for that because it's taking up more of your time. And that's another thing that a lot of people forget about is they have to pay themselves, which is why John talks about, unless you're paying yourself 30 cents an hour, which in the beginning, that's close. When I did the math, when I was working for my dad, I was making like $1.30 an hour. Um, so I think you should strive to make closer to $50 to $80 an hour if you're doing lapidary. If you're really good at it and in a good area, you should strive for $100 an hour, which is about what I was making when I was running my own business, was about $100 an hour. If I counted for my cutting time, travel time, and actually doing the show. So that's something that you should figure out. And another big area I want to talk about is organization. I am the exact opposite of what organized looks like. And that's a problem because you need to know these metrics. You need to know what things cost you. You need to know what you have in your inventory and what you need more of. So I would say, my sister really good at this. She measures everything. She can tell you what everything costs down to the penny and how much she spent on it, how much including her time. So it is good to get organized. You should inventory your stuff. Technically, you're supposed to inventory your stuff because you have to pay taxes on that. So um, you should account for about 30% at least be taxes. So if you make $1,000, you're gonna pay 300 bucks in taxes. So and that's not counting sales tax because you're also gonna pay income tax. So there's a lot of tax on this stuff. That's a big thing to account for. Expense is, I think, probably the biggest thing where people struggle is when they get started, they don't realize how much everything costs because it doesn't seem like a lot in the beginning, and then you realize how much it adds up. Because to do a show, for example, you need cases, you need a way to transport your inventory, you need a way to show it. In fact, actually, let me share my screen. Let's see. Can you all see my screen? Good. So here is my booth setup. This is at one of the Denver shows. Um, Lots of cabochons laid out. I didn't have any spheres at this show because I was traveling very light. And this is a fairly small show, two tables. But these trays are very, they add up when you have a lot of these trays. So that's one of your expenses. You got to buy all the trays. You need lights. That's going to add up. These silver cases in the back, that's what I would transport the cabs in. Those are a decent chunk of change. A lot of shows are not going to provide tables. So I tell people whenever you're doing a show, no matter what the email says that you're going to get, because you're going to get an email that tells you what you need to do for each show. Um, Always bring tables and chairs. I cannot tell you how many shows I've shown up to and they said, "Oh, we ran out of tables and chairs," or "No, we don't provide the tables and chairs." Excuse me. So always take tables, chairs. One of the other expenses that you're going to need is a till. You're going to need a way to process payments. For me, I used Square. I took Venmo, PayPal, all the good stuff. But PayPal I really like, or I'm sorry, excuse me, Square I really like because you can actually process, you can account for everything in there. You can ring up cash sales as well because you need to keep track of all of your sales. And at the end of the show, you're gonna pay your the sales tax, all the sales tax that you collected. And then so that you need to know how much you did at each show. That's important. While we're looking at here, we can go back to the aesthetics a little bit of where it doesn't feel cluttered. It should feel a little bit more elegant and flows. This is about as cluttered as I think a booth should be. Ideally, I would have a space to put all this stuff in the back, but we'd already filled underneath the tables because I didn't have very much. I was doing a small car. So I didn't have very much room for this show, but I actually, before this show got busy, I put a cloth over the top of these bins so that it didn't look messy. You want your show to be clean, elegant, it should look professional, and it should show well. That's actually one of the most important things I think you can do when you're setting up a show for your presentation is the lighting. A lot of people overlook the lighting, and it really makes a huge difference. In fact, if you go over, let's go over to this website here. This is who I buy the lighting from, the show off lighting. They are expensive, but well worth it. I like this light right here with the extended head so that you can aim it back towards you a little bit so it's not blinding customers. And while we're looking at the lights here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the lights because bright is not better. On these, the ones I had were the 90-watt extended head. And then a lot of people would just go for the 6,000 because they think that's brighter, but you actually want the sun balanced, and that'll actually give the stones better color. So make sure that when you're buying lighting, you're not just buying stark white LEDs. It'll make your stuff look terrible. But this light, very expensive, $453. I had a bunch of these. They're well worth it. They clamp to the table. They come completely apart so you can put them in a small tote to take them to shows. They look professional and they're very well done. So I think this is one of the best investments you can make for doing shows is buying these lights. They have cheaper options too, but if I was going to buy them, this is the one I would buy right here, the $453 one. I do have a cheap alternative for you though. Not ideal, but we did try these out. If you notice these cheap lights here, this is a just a regular lamp. We bought these on Amazon for I think $20. And then we bought these garage LED fan lights that are very bright, and we use these. These were a little too white, which was the biggest problem with them. But if you're on a budget, you can buy that setup for like I think $35 a light. And you need 1 to 2 per table. The other disadvantage to this is if you notice in this picture, these lights, those are the show off lights, these poles that you see here. They go way up into the air and don't wash out the color. They're not too bright. If you look at the picture here, over here in the corner, it looks perfect. And if you look right under this light, it's washed out. That makes a big difference when customers are looking at stones. The other big difference that it makes is if a customer is standing right here looking at you while you're talking, this light is going to be in their eye. So it's not as attractive, not as professional. I got rid of all of these lights because I couldn't stand them and changed to all of these the lights I just showed you, this light right here. So very nice looking. And while we're looking at stuff that you're if you're doing my setup here that you need, Johnson Brothers lapidary, it's just cheap, but they work good. These knockoff Rikers, very nice for they're pretty durable for how cheap they are. If you buy the actual Riker brand Rikers, they're much more expensive, and I don't know that they're really worth the money. So I probably had 200 of these filled with cabs at one point. This is that case that I was showing you. So these have actually come down in price. These are $130 a case now. The biggest disadvantage to these, and I'll tell you guys while you're looking at these, if I was going to buy these again, I'd buy these smaller ones. These are insanely heavy when they have 24 trays of cabochons in them. Like most people could not lift this up easily. It was a real hassle to move them around. So if you are going to buy these, I'd go for the 12 tray ones because these ones are a nightmare to move around. And then one of the other big things I wanted to talk about is customers should never have their hands full. If a customer has their hands full, they cannot buy more. So it's a problem if your customer, in my case, they would fill their hand up with cabochons and they wouldn't be able to buy more. And so I bought a bunch of these trays and I would keep stacks of these along the table where customers could reach them or I could hand them to them. And any customer that would pick up a cabochon, I'd offer them a tray. If they said, I don't think I need a tray, I'd say, well, it's always great to have a different color background to put your stones on because most of my trays were white. So I had black trays, and that gave people a good contrast to look at stuff. They'd almost always fill a tray if I handed them a tray. If you don't give them a tray, they're going to buy whatever, how much ever fits in the palm of their hand. So I highly recommend if you're doing something similar to what I was doing, that you get trays like this. Makes a huge difference. Empty hands can keep shopping. Full hands are done. So I like these two, and they're very inexpensive. A couple bucks a tray, well worth it. All right, and then I don't know where my chat went. So I can see all of your guys' questions.
So while you're looking at where that is, James has a question. What do you add to resales of wholesale material?
Do I do what now?
What do you add to resales of wholesale material?
I do not understand that question.
I don't as well. Kirsten has a question. For your displays, have you ever played around with the backing? Like yours is white now, but have you toyed around with other colors, black or purple?
Yes. So actually, let me show you. If we move over, so here's white background, and then oh, of course I didn't actually get one of the, okay, I can show you in this picture right here. So you can see I bought some cheap felt online and that was sticky on one side, and I cut it to fit these trays, and I just did black. I wouldn't do any other color. Black and white is the only one I would use. But black works really good for, especially like white, like these moonstones right here, made a huge difference in contrast. So whenever I would like make a new tray of cabs, I would put them on black and then put them on white and see which one looked better. And that's how I determined what went into the tray, because presentation is everything. This is a much smaller show that I did. This was one of my favorite shows to do. This show cost like 80 bucks to set up at, and I would generally make 3 to 5,000 in 2 days. So it was a really good show for me. Yes, Thomas, that is one of the things that I account for. This is the Rocky Mountain Gym Show in Salt Lake City. It is a very, very small show. The entire room is maybe like 50 by 50 feet. Um, what was I saying? Oh, yes. So I actually take that into consideration during my pricing. It is an old church. Is that I know that I account for about 10% theft. Now, there's a big reason I changed when in the beginning. So these all have glass lids, or actually, I think it's plastic for these cheap ones that go over the cabs. And I discovered that I was selling a lot less because customers didn't want to take the lids off. I don't know if they thought it was rude or impolite or they needed permission, but people would walk up and be like, "Is it okay if I look at them?" when I had the glass on them. And so I decided to take all of the covers off and just leave them open. I had plenty of cabochons broken, plenty of them stolen. It was way worth it because I probably sold 10 times more the show that I took the lids off than the previous show. So it made it worth it, but when I'm pricing stuff, I account for theft. It's gonna happen. You have to plan for it. You're gonna lose inventory to theft and breakage. You're gonna have little kids walk by and knock stuff off the table. Just plan for it. It's gonna happen. No reason to get upset. I never charged anybody that broke anything because these cabs, most of these cabs are between $5 and $50. So it's not the end of the world if one breaks. I looked at that. I generally liked everything laid out flat. Because a surprising amount of cabs fit on laid out like this, and it just makes it look bright and you can see everything. So like if you look back here with the spheres, I used razors, but I think for the cabs, flat works really well. Yeah, even for the jewelry, unless it was really high end, I wouldn't put I'd just leave it in trays like this. If it was a high end piece of jewelry, then yes, I would put it in a cabinet. And some of the spheres that I would take to shows, I would put in glass cases as well if they were, in the thousands. But the majority of them, I mean, in this picture, there's at least a few $1,000 spheres just on the table right here. So and I do put more expensive things to the back so that they're harder to steal. So when I'm laying out a table, all of the cheapest cabs are going to go in the front row and they're going to get progressively more expensive as you go back. And one of the other reasons that I like this layout versus having them on risers is when I have a customer that's spending a good amount of money with me and there's a lot of people, it's crowded, it's hard to look, I can invite them behind the table and they can still see everything. So that way they felt special and they were behind the table with me, they could chat, they could still look at everything, and then they were actually closer to the more expensive cabs. And generally, if I invited people behind the table, that's what they were looking at anyway. So it worked out really well like that. Yeah, that's smart, Daniel. Have a distraction for the kids. Um, exactly, Andrea. Insider fail. You want people to make people feel special, and that's one of the ways that you can make them feel special. And if I had all of these trays on risers, you wouldn't really be able to see them from the back. So it worked really well to have them laid out flat like this. And everything how you change your setup is one more thing you have to take to the show. This entire setup that you see right here, minus the sphere machine in the back, I could fit in a small car. So it works out really well this way. The majority of my customers were making jewelry or getting into making jewelry. There was several places that taught jewelry making classes nearby, and I had actually become really good friends with them, and so they would send customers to me to buy. And so there was a lot of people getting into making cabochon or making jewelry that were buying it. And then I had people that were professional jewelers that would come buy tons of cabs from me.
So to go
For
back on earlier questions, Zeke, sorry. So Ed was asking earlier, for the cheaper lamps that you mentioned, they seem to have petals in them or on them, can you angle them away so the customers are not staring directly at them?
Yes, you can angle them. And if you really wanted to, you could put them up on the table and use a clamp to hold them to the table, but they have a decent sized base. So I generally didn't do that. Like this is a little bit before I changed the lighting, because these are, so the lights that you see in this picture, the show off lighting, these are their cheaper models. And if you notice, the bulb is very far to the back. That's why I get that extended head, is so they go out and face down towards me a little bit. So generally I'd have the light in my eye, but I mean, I didn't care. I was there to sell rocks, so I just didn't want, I wanted the
Alright.
customer to see well. But yes, these little fan lights are adjustable so that you can angle them not towards your eyes.
Right. And then Jimmy Ellis was also asking earlier, he sells mostly necklaces. Do you have any recommendations for display?
For if you're doing necklaces, make it look elegant. Get the fancy neck stands. Have a mirror there. Let people try on jewelry. It's just got to feel elegant. The more you get into like jewelry, the more elegant it needs to feel. My display is, I would still put towards the rougher side of things, but it worked really well for me.
All right. And then Mike Salazar said, so based on time management, if he would want to sell slabs, it sounds like it would be more of an advantage to purchase a drop saw over a slab saw. Any thoughts on this?
Oh, definitely. If you said, here's a couple $1,000, go set up for a show and make as much money as you can, I'd buy a drop saw. I would buy the best rock I could, that you can cut in a drop saw. Obviously, if you're not doing anything really fragile, drop saw is not going to be the best for it. And I would buy bins, the just cheap bins from Walmart. I'd cut up all the rock into slabs, 1/4 inch thick. I would figure out what my cost was, put a good price on them, lay them all out on a table, and let people go through bins of slabs. So that's a great starter business, or it's a great business in general. I know people that may do really well doing that. One of the other, I'll let you get back to asking questions here in a second. One of the other things I want to mention is, if you notice in this picture, there's no tablecloth. That is because I forgot my tablecloths, not intentionally. It looks so much better if you get a nice tablecloth like this. These were provided by this particular show. Get on Amazon and get fitted tablecloths for your tables. It'll make a world of difference in how well they present. And they even make them in the back now that this is all open, so you can stick stuff in there. That's another expense that very worth it. It makes a big difference. I've seen a lot of questions about pricing. So we can talk about pricing for a second, because I know lots of people are curious about pricing. Pricing is tricky because you have to figure out your cost. Now, let's say you buy a rock for $10. Is your cost $10, or is it your cost, your time, all the things that you have to do to get ready for that show? So it's really something that you have to factor in. I would say at a minimum for lower end, because let me start over. You have to bracket pricing into different categories. Things under $1,000 are gonna be priced differently than things over $1,000 or over $10,000. So for cabochons, for instance, if I pay $5 for a cab, I'm probably putting it out for somewhere between 15 and 25, so a 3 to 5 time markup. And that's going to give me enough room to sell it, give a little bit of a discount, have some other things break, and still make money, pay my taxes. So a 3 to 5 time is my general preferred pricing method. But if let's say I have a mineral specimen or a really high-end sphere that cost me $1,000, I'm probably not going to mark that up to 3 or 5,000. That's very unlikely that I would ever sell it. That's one where we talk about how long it takes to sell things. So if I pay $1,000 for a rock, I'm probably going to mark that sphere somewhere between 13 and 1500 so that I can account for, because one, you also got to account for that sphere might not turn out. Let's say you buy $1,000 rock and it busts and you're out $1,000. So that's something else you got to take in consideration. So let's say I'm into that rock $1,000. I still have to take it to a show. I still got to pay my taxes. I'm probably putting like 1,500 on that. I may haggle a little bit. I may take 1,400. I may take 1,300. But that's something that you have to consider is you're not going to get that 3 to 5 times on that. And when you get into the really big world, like high-end mineral collectors, they're making generally 1 to 10% on their stuff. So one of the biggest mineral dealers in Tucson, he makes 10% on everything he sells. Now, almost everything that he sells is $10,000 or more, and the majority of it is closer to $100,000. But if you pay $90,000 for a rock and sell it for $100,000, that's still a good day. So pricing is broken up into categories. The Arkenstone, I think they select really, really high-end minerals. They're beautiful, and they are definitely the top of retail. They have great stuff, and if you want the best of the best, it's very hard to find, and you're going to pay a lot for it. Which is one of the other reasons that John says life's too short to cut ugly rocks. You should cut the best of what you have because it's going to sell better. Nobody wants to buy the junk stuff, so don't cut it. Yes, I did offer bulk pricing. I got to the point where I was pricing almost everything at that like 5-time markup range. So I paid $1 for it, sell it, market for 5, and I would offer wholesale where people could if you what I did was you had to spend $1,000 and you'd get 50% off on the cabochons. I didn't do this for the spheres because I wasn't there yet. But on cabochons, if you picked out $2,000 worth of cabs, I'd sell it to you for $1,000 if you were a business. If you were buying less than $1,000, I would give you a deal dependent on how much you bought. If you buy $100, I may give you 10% off. If you buy $250, I may give you 15% off. I didn't have a set pricing, but it was dependent on what that person was getting and how much money I had into it. And if it was something I had had for a long time, I would give a bigger discount on it because I wanted it gone. Yeah, and Rob brings up a really good point. You need liability insurance. It's very important because God forbid you leave an extension cord out, someone trips on it, breaks their neck, hospitalized, and it could cost $1 million. John and Sherman are much better at giving examples of that. But that is a really good point. It could ruin potentially your life if you don't have insurance to cover costs like that. And it happens. So you just don't want it to happen to you when you don't have insurance. I used to have a sign that said the price was dependent on your attitude. And you know that brings up another good point, Robert. Statistically, making customers laugh, make them spend about 10% more. So like if you go to a lot of shows, you'll notice there's a lot of dealers that just sit behind their booth, play on their phone. They're not working, they're playing on their phone. You're there to sell stuff, you're not there to hold a chair down. And those dealers generally at the end of the show complain, it wasn't that good of a show, it was slow this year, nobody was buying. Almost every show I did, no matter how good I do, somebody would complain about how slow the show was. They were the people behind the booth that weren't engaging with customers. If you had walked up to me at a show 90% of the time, I'm not saying I was perfect and always there. I'm going to say, hi, how are you? Big smile. I'm going to be talking with a smile. I'm just going to be having a great day and so excited to see you, tell you about all the rocks. And I'm not focused on selling. I'm focusing on having a great day and making sure that they have a great day. And I'll tell you, a lot of customers, they only bought stuff because I was positive, engaged with them, and taught them something. So the more knowledge you have to give somebody, the more likely they are going to buy something. So if you look at like my booth or all those trays of cabs, I had something interesting to say about almost every one of those trays. And as soon as somebody would look at a tray, I would tell them about it or I'd ask them if they were familiar with it. Just to give them that information, get them excited about it. Exactly, Kirsten. Very smart. Know your product. And so, and that also goes back to knowing your customer. You know, what do they want? You know, that's why I got into ring stones, because that's what my customers wanted, was ring stones. You know, another add-on to that is a lot of people that are getting into lapidary nowadays are interested in the metaphysical aspect. A lot of old-time rock hounds despise it. And like I would see dealers that had great stuff that newer people, whether you believe in the metaphysical stuff or not, they would talk negatively towards those people, and those people would not spend money with them. I personally do not care. Everybody's money is green. So I kept a copy of the Crystal Bible behind my booth, and if someone would ask me what the metaphysical property is, I would hand them the metaphysical or the Crystal Bible. I was like, I could not tell you anything about the metaphysical properties. Here's a book to help you with that. So it's just something to keep in mind that your customers don't necessarily have the same views as you do. And the cranky person that wants to complain about the metaphysical people probably isn't selling that much. So have an open mind. Yeah, that's smart, Terry. You know, I let my sister big into the metaphysical stuff. If I was doing a show and she was next to me, I'd be like, she can tell you that, go ask her. She'll tell you all about the metaphysical stuff. If someone wanted to know about lapidary or how to cut and polish rock, she'd say, go talk to Zeke. He knows about that. So and pairing with people is really good. One of the other things that I did for my business, because it was mostly focused around cabochons, is I would sometimes pair with a silversmith or a wire wrapper to take orders right there. So I'd have them sit down, they could sell their jewelry if they wanted to. Generally, I wouldn't charge them a booth fee. I would just let them take a small space to help me, and they would have to help out for my show because I could afford to buy a really big booth and be okay. And it was a lot of people that were getting started but did good work. So I'd have them sit down. They're going to take custom orders on the spot, which means that people are buying cabochons from me for them to go make custom orders with. Sold a lot of cabochons that way. So it's good to find people that you can pair with. You know, maybe you're a rough rock dealer and you've got thousands of pounds of beautiful rock that would be turned into lovely spheres. Find a sphere maker to set up next to you with their little sphere machine to take to shows. They're going to take so many orders and you're going to sell big rocks that people want to cut spheres out of. So, because they may not necessarily have the ability to do it themselves, but it's something that they want. So pairing with somebody is a very good point. Yeah, it's very true. Silversmiths buy a lot. Yeah, so let me screen share again. Find that fancy tech button. Oh my gosh, I lost everything. Oh, hallelujah. I was afraid I was gonna have to get Darwin to help me again. Let's see. Oh, so if you look at this picture right here, I would take one of the low speed sphere machines to the shows. Now, I wouldn't take any rough rock to cut spheres out of. I would take spheres that had already been ground into the first couple grits. So I was generally starting them at 400 grit or 800 grit because the other cups are really noisy. And doing it this way, people would get mesmerized by watching the sphere machine turn. People would stand here for an hour and watch it spin. They just so fascinated by this. And so on this particular show, this is the entrance right here. I got the best space in the entire show because I offered to demonstrate sphere cutting at the show. So people would walk in, stare at the sphere machine, and then come and buy spheres in cabs. And this created a really good flow for me because they'd be mesmerized by that. And I actually got a better space because I was willing to bring the sphere machine. excuse me. So that's the reason I bought this sphere machine, was to take to shows. Works out really well. I highly recommend doing demonstration if you can, because you'll actually get better booth spaces. Oh, that's awesome, Daniel. And as a general rule, I did not do custom work. I did some custom work. I don't like custom work as much because it's something that I have to keep track of. And even though it's the same amount of energy to actually cut a sphere for someone else as it is to me, it's now something I have to keep track of. I have to make sure it works out properly. I have to make sure that I'm taking care of their rock for them because they trusted me with it. So as a general rule, I did not like to take custom orders because I'd rather just throw it all into a pile, cut them all out, get them done in one process, and not have to worry about that one sphere.
Kristen was
Go
asking earlier, sorry,
ahead.
how do you find these people to pair with? Do you find them at the shows themselves?
Yeah, that's how everybody I ever paired with was somebody I met doing a show. They would, and a lot of them were actually customers. One gal that paired with me to do silversmithing, she would come and spend $1,000 every time I did a show in her area. And so I was like, show me your work. I love to see what you're doing. And she showed me, and I was like, it's beautiful. It's great work. I can't believe you're a new silversmith. Are you interested in doing this? And she's like, that would help my business so much. I'd love to do that. And so we came up with an agreement, and she'd come to do shows with me. I'd tell her when and where I was doing them, and she'd bring her half a table set up. And she enjoyed doing that a lot. I do want to address a question. Somebody asked if I was collecting my own stuff and selling it. There are a lot of laws about collecting and selling off of public land. You cannot sell, barter, or trade with anything that came off of public land. So I was never going out and collecting rock and then selling it. That is against the law. Now, Terry, in the comments, I'm sure you guys have been seeing him, is a good friend. And I actually have a picture of some of his material here somewhere. Let's see. Oh, maybe it's the other way. Oh, there it is. So Terry is a good friend, and he owns the mine that this peach opal comes from. So Terry, being the awesome gentleman that he is, let me go collect, and I cut him some spheres, and then I made beautiful cabochons to sell. Oh, that's awesome, Terry. Although he's not supposed to be selling spheres, he's supposed to be sending them to me. So that worked out really well because Terry has the right, because he has a claim to collect and sell this. I did not. So Terry would let me collect this and sell it, and in turn, he got beautiful spheres. So that worked out really well, but I wouldn't just go on public land and collect and sell. That'll get you in a lot of trouble. So this table that you saw, oh, let me go back one. This table right here, this was set up for this show. It was one that they actually used as a like dining room table. I got this table because I got this preferred space. This is not something I would haul to shows. I used 6-foot tables that were folding tables. That's what I used to set up. This is the only show that I used this table at, and it's because I got special permission because I was a preferred vendor there because I demonstrated the spheres. And so I asked for a bigger table with more space, and she loved me, so she gave me this space. Yeah, it is a huge table. It's absolutely massive. I think this table's 20 feet long. Yeah, every cabochon you see in this picture has a little sticker on the back that has a price on it based on the gram weight. And so let's see, I have a better picture. So this is what one of the trays looks like. I did nope, not color coded. They're all just white stickers. I'm sure you could come up with a much fancier scheme or system than I had. But these just have a plain white sticker on the back, and you can see it on the edge of a couple of them, like right there. You can see the edge of one of the stickers. But I would probably this is the Thulite from Norway, by the way. This is all of these have a price on the back, and I actually went to putting a name in the middle of each tray, and that made a huge difference. A lot of things, especially the more you know, the more you will forget that other people don't know that, and that's something that they still need to learn. So don't assume that everybody knows what you know. Teach people, educate them, ask them if they know, ask them if they want to learn. It makes a big difference because I know what this is, and I know where it's from. Makes perfect sense to me that it doesn't have a label. It's obvious, it's Thulite. Not everybody is going to know what that is. Highland Park Lapidary sells 3 sphere machines. One is the low speed sphere machine or the standard speed, which is the one that you saw in that picture. They have the high speed sphere machine, which is my favorite one. And that is the sphere machine that you see in a lot of my videos. And then they have the hydraulic sphere machine, which will do the massive up to 24-inch spheres. Peter, the price per gram was entirely based on what I paid for the stone and how much I had to put into it. Another thing to take into consideration is, do you have to vacuum seal the stone? There was a lot of cabochons that I would vacuum seal the rough rock, and now that's an added cost to the finished product. This is a really, really bad picture. This is my dad's garage. You can see just how lovely messy it is, but this is the only picture I could find of this sphere setup that was a direct picture to show you what this looks like straight on. I love this tiered stand. I actually am curious, would you guys be interested in these stands? I'm trying to see if John will make these because these are crazy expensive. I think these stands are like $300. I'm like, there can't be that much to them. It's just plywood that pops together. Yeah, that's very true, Rachel. That's what I call Tucson junk, where everything is ununique, it's the same boxes of stuff. That's exactly what I was thinking, Denise. And everybody has the exact same stuff. I call it Tucson junk because if you go to Tucson, you'll see miles of it where these people are buying it from. And that stuff will get passed over a lot, which is one of the other reasons I did really well at shows. I cut almost every sphere in this picture. There's a few here I didn't cut, but the majority of them are ones that I cut. And so when I tell people that, they get a lot of attention. The other thing I want to talk about is marketing. Are they easy to learn, the sphere machines? Yes, the high-speed sphere machine is probably the easiest one to learn, but all of them are pretty easy to use. If you're just wanting to get started, the low speed sphere machine is also a really good machine, but because it cuts slower, it actually is a little bit harder to do. Yeah, I think shows as a whole is one of the reasons that they're dying is because a lot of people are getting into the I'm just gonna buy the same junk that everybody else is selling because I can buy it really cheap. I can put ridiculous prices on it and sell a lot of it. And for people just getting into it, they don't know that that's just junk. So they sell tons of that stuff. Like you look at like the TikTok live sales stuff that they do on there, and it's all the same garbage. So I do see that all that's getting more and more popular, but it's also one of the reasons that y'all have such a good opportunity to make good money cutting your own rocks because people are looking for that genuine, I cut this, I made something beautiful craftsmanship, not the I bought it this laser cut CNC carving for $1 and I'm charging you $20 for it. So Mary, that's really easy to calculate when you're talking about, so let's say I buy a 1 pound rock. Actually, I'm going to use a 1 kilo rock because I'm going to talk in grams. So 1 kilo is 1,000 grams. So let's say I have 1,000 grams of rough rock. I'm going to lose about 60% of that, assuming that there's no major flaws in the rock just from cutting into cabochons. Excuse me. So I'm gonna figure I'm just automatically gonna lose 60% of that rock. So that's just accounted for. So if I paid $1 a gram for that rock, the finished product is gonna be over $1 a gram, my cost for the rough, because, excuse me, I got rid of 60% of it just grinding it away. But you can also do it really easy. If you, let's say you buy a $10 agate, you cut 5 cabs out of it. You know that each one of those cabs, you're into it $2 worth of rough, no matter how much of it you ground away. So that's an easy way to look at it too. Not as much math involved. But back to what I was talking about with marketing, doing social media stuff is really helpful. Like this picture right here, these aren't even finished. This is just a rough picture sitting on a dirty cab machine. This kind of stuff gets so much attention because there's so much, it's so genuine. Of I'm sitting here with dirty hands grinding rocks that people love this kind of stuff. This picture will get more attention than if I had just posted one of these agates as a finished polished specimen with a really beautiful like picture. Because people like to feel connected to the process and how genuine it is of the hard work it takes to sit and grind on rock all day long. So doing this kind of stuff, you know, all of my most popular videos are of just the sphere machine and the core drill running. I have videos that have 400,000 views. That's all they are, is a 30-second clip of a sphere machine and a core drill running. Yeah, this bottom set here is an island agate, one of the first ones actually that John let me cut. We were looking at them and he was like, cut this, and it was just turned out phenomenal. And then these two right here are Las Mornitas agates, the Mexican. Then there's a Lake Superior agate. And then this one up here is a purple plume agate from Idaho. Not very much of this ever came out. Well, for me, Thomas, it was actually a full-time job. I went from doing real estate to doing handyman work. And it's not like I mean, handyman work, I was making, I don't know, like $50 an hour or something like that doing that. I made way better money when I stopped doing that and I started doing social media and shows. Because, you know, I started a website and I was getting 5,000 hits a month off of my Instagram, you know, with my website linked to my Instagram because so many people were viewing those cutting videos. People love to see the actual cutting happening. So that's why I really tell people if you want to build a big social media presence, do lots of videos and pictures of you cutting the rock. People love that kind of stuff, and it'll get tons of attention. And then, of course, you have to post pictures of epically awesome things to also get attention. This is a Koyamito pseudomorph I actually bought from John on the live sale. And when I bought this, it was extremely ugly. You could see like this pattern down here, and you couldn't see any of these eyes up here. And I sat and ground and contoured this whole piece to get it to really show. And that's a really great transformational video. Somewhere I've got to find the original picture of how ugly this agate really was when I started, because it really was not a beautiful agate. And then I spent probably 2 hours grinding on this thing to make it look this excellent. And that got a lot of attention. People watching it transform to a not a great agate to a really good agate. So definitely something that you know, transformational videos, people absolutely love. Makes a huge difference. And I would actually keep a bunch of these pictures on my phone and I would show people at the shows. You know, people would ask me, do I cut the spheres or do I make the cabochons? And I would show them pictures of the whole process. And they love to see that that stuff. Yes, Amanda, they do certainly do. I'll try to see if I can find the other picture of this agate so you guys can see the before. This is the only one I could find for tonight. Also, any questions or any questions I missed?
Not sure if you answered this one. Did you freeform cabs? Did your freeform cab sell better than the standard sizes?
I would say it's split. Um, like for instance, the turquoise always sold better as freeform cabs. Some would sell better as calibrated cabs. I like having a mix, although I prefer to do freeforms. But if you look at the table here, there's plenty of ovals and rounds and common shapes, and then there's plenty of freeforms mixed in as well. So it depends on the customer, and some people it's just their preference. Some people would much rather have an oval or a teardrop around, and they think a freeform looks like sloppy work. And some people think an oval and a round are boring, and they want something unique and exciting, so they're going to go for that freeform. The biggest reason I like freeforms is because they're a heck of a lot easier to cut, and you can cut them a lot faster.
Okay. And then we have Kirsten asking if people ask if a mineral or agate is ethnically sourced, how do you respond to that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So if people ask if a mineral or agate is ethnically sourced, how do you respond to that? Or maybe ethically sourced?
That depends. Do you know where it came from? Do you know that the rough rock you bought is ethnically sourced? If you don't know, probably wouldn't tell people. I'd probably say, you know, I'm not sure where it came from. Or maybe you bought it in an old collection. You say, I got it in an old collection. I don't know who sourced it originally. Ethically, yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Messing up the homeschooled kid, of course. So for me, a lot of the stuff I buy and a lot of the stuff that like John buys, and, you know, you can also make a joke out of this too. Like the peach opal, I used to say, no, that was not ethically sourced. It was brutal, hard manual labor, and I was not making very much money when I was out there digging it. So it was definitely slave labor when I was out there pounding on rock. People find that funny. But if you don't know, I would tell people that you don't know. And if you do really care about that, you should go out there and find people that are ethically sourcing their rock. And it'll make a big difference in your sales. People love to hear that it's ethically sourced, but I would only tell them that it's ethically sourced if you know it actually was. Was one of the great things about buying rock from John is John's going to a lot of these places where they have the mines, and he's hanging out with the people that are digging the rock, so he knows them personally. You know, the Andres, the guy that digs the Laguna agates, we know him very well. We know that they're ethically sourced, so that's not a concern with those. Yes, yes, they are, Ed.
All right. And we have Robert here asking, how do you educate the buyer to avoid the trash? And how do you carry their interest outside the show?
Um, Avoiding the trash. I never down talk anybody unless someone asks me directly. You know, you guys we're all very close. I feel like I hang out with you guys almost every day. You practically feel like family. So I'm a little bit more open with you guys than I would be with somebody at a show. But as a general rule, I'm not focused on the negative over there. I'm focused on the positive right here. It's, you know, why mention a competitor when you can talk about how great your product is? So it's one of those things that if someone asks me, I'll be like, yeah, that's, you know, cheap machine work done overseas that nobody's putting any love or heart into that work. Um, You're funny, Kirsten. Um, and you know, my work here, I'm cutting it in my dad's garage. I work hard, I enjoy it, I put a lot of love in what I'm doing into my work. And I really enjoy watching other people enjoy these stones. It makes me very happy. So that's kind of how I would focus on that. But don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. Just because other people are successful doesn't mean that you can't be successful. Success is not a finite amount. So it doesn't matter if those people are making money over there selling stuff. We're focused on us and how we're going to grow and how we're going to succeed. You can be very successful, and other people can be very successful at the same time. Exactly, Daniel.
I think Richard.
Yes, Robert, exactly. And the other way you can answer that is, how rare is a Labradorite sphere? Well, Labradorite in itself, very common. Depends on the quality. Like if you look at this picture, I hated selling these, but I did. And I told people, if you look at this really bright green tray right there, those are dyed Labradorites. I would tell people it's common, it's junk, it's dyed so that it looks that good. There's nothing special or unique about it, and they'd still buy it by the handful. So, people liked it. They knew it was, what is construction lapidary? Yes, certain shapes do sell better than others. My particular favorite shape, and one of my most popular because I told people it was a unique shape that I really enjoyed making, is a triangle with the corners ground off. So it's technically it's a hexagon because it's six-sided, but it's basically a triangle with flat tips. And people love to buy that shape from me because it's one of the shapes that I really enjoyed making. I've never really seen anybody else make that shape. At least not the same way I did. And yes, Amanda. And so that shape sold really well because it was something unique that I generally made. I'd be happy to teach you how to make it, Eric. It's an extremely easy shape to make. Teardrops were probably the most popular shape that I made. People love teardrops, especially for necklaces. They look really good, very common shape. Like that one that John was harassing me about last night, that kind of egg-shaped teardrop. That's a very popular shape for pendants. People love that. That's awesome, Robert. Yeah, the shield, that's a very popular shape. I'm not opposed to ovals. It's kind of become a running joke that I don't like ovals. I've cut plenty of ovals. What I don't like is if you look at, like, take Big Jasper, for example. You'll have this beautiful, could be $1,000 slab. And back in 1970, when ovals were the thing for belt buckles and bolo ties, when you had the replaceable ones, people would cut the worst ovals. They'd pick the ugliest part of the rock, they'd cut through the best pattern to get to the ugly oval that they wanted to cut. And that's why I hate when why that's why the hate came about, is because I would harass people that would take beautiful slabs and cut the ugliest ovals out of the most amazing slabs. To repolish turquoise is very soft. So I would set up a cotton buffing wheel with ZAM on it, and I would just buff them all to a polish. Um, Depending on how bad the polish is. You can send me a picture, Thomas. The other thing that's going to sell your stones, let's say that you have something really common, a really common agate. You just red jasper, for example. Nothing extremely rare, nothing expensive. How well you cut that stone will greatly affect the price. Someone that's not a good cutter, maybe their shape isn't very good, maybe the girdle isn't very good, the dome isn't very good. That cab is not going to be as attractive or nearly as valuable as someone that took the effort to make a really good cab out of it and get the best polish on it. I've taken stones that were very common, not necessarily expensive or overly attractive, and put a great polish on them, and that made them sell really well. So for my cabbing process, generally most of my cabs I would finish by hand, but if I was doing them, I would do them up till 220 grit and then put them in a vibratory tumbler to finish them. Excuse me. But I don't just make one cab at a time. I would sit down with 50 to 100 preforms and do them all on step 1, then do them all on step 2, all on step 3 until they were all done together. And then I would inspect all of them, and if I found one with a flaw, it would get put back in with the next batch and get redone. The other thing that can be helpful for you guys, no matter how bad you are at it, is branding. Someone asked earlier how I kept people's attention after we were away from the show. In business cards, I'll tell you the secret to making a great business card. You want to have your logo on there. You want to have a picture of yourself. You want to have a picture of the most attractive things that you sell. And you want to make a nice, laminated business card, because people are not going to remember gym quality rock shop. They're going to remember talking to me, so they're going to remember my face and what they saw at the show. So my business card had a picture of me on it. Actually, I had a picture of me and Hannah, because Hannah's much more attractive, so people are more likely to remember and look at the card. And it had a QR code with a link to all my social medias, my YouTube channel, everything that I could put on there. And then it had a picture of the most beautiful things that I had recently cut and polished. Oh, that was funny. But having a picture of yourself is actually really good on a business card, because people will remember who that business card is from. Like, think about it. If you have a stack of business cards that you picked up at a show, you went to a big show in Tucson and everybody gives you a business card. How many, at the end of the show, how many of those business cards do you remember? Yeah, like a realtor. Although I was a realtor before I got back into doing rocks. So that's probably where I learned that, actually. Yeah, some people will get into a big show, and they will then rent the booth space for hire, which is why they say no subleasing. That's not uncommon. My sister runs a show out of Utah, um, and people would try to do that all the time, buy big booths and then rent them out for more. This was one of the most popular trays I had. And I would actually separate. So one of the things that I don't know if you guys have noticed when you look at the trays of cabs that I've done, I make the whole tray one color because it's very eye-catching. If there was just one Labradorite or even a small handful of Labradorite cabochons in this tray, you would not notice them as much as when the whole tray is filled with the best blue flash. So I would divide all of the Labradorite. I had one that was all purple flash. I had one that was all the common, like the greens and light blues. I had a tray that was all the bright golds. And that catches a lot of attention. The other thing that I do when I'm laying out the trays of cabs, and not every show I did it at, but especially the bigger shows that I did at and the later shows that I did, is I would look at the color wheel and say, all right, I got a blue cab here. What's the opposite color on the color wheel? I'm gonna put that next to it. So like I had a tray of cabs that was lapis, thulite, and malachite, and that tray got so much attention because it was so bright and so well contrasted that people loved to look at it. So this is even earlier on than some of those other photos. But you can still see a lot of the cabs are, and this one's not laid out very well because you can see here we got a pink next to a pinkish red. So those two cabs should not be next to each other. If this tray was even moved over one space, it would make a big difference in the sales. Another thing you notice is I have all these rutilated quartz cabs here in a white tray. That's a fail. It should be black underneath that and it would pop better. So it makes a big difference. In this picture right here, if you look all the way down to the end where these yellow cabs are, there's probably about 12,000 cabs here. There's a lot of these trays have about 50 to 75. Some of them have 100 depending on the size of the cab. And there's a little bit more behind what you can see here too. But another good example, I was harassing my dad a little bit earlier about how his booth looks. So you can see when it turns the corner here where these bags are, that's my dad's booth. And you can see it looks messy. It's not as attractive because it's so cluttered. Which is one of the reasons that I talk about less than 10%. I planned on 10%, but it was almost never that high. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it. Most of the shows, yeah, that's right, Jimmy. It did make it look better. Most of the shows you're gonna pay extra for power. So this is a show that my sister runs. I think it was an extra $30 per booth. Maybe it was $50 per booth to get electricity. And that's gonna be the situation with most shows is that you're gonna pay extra for power. So for a lower end show, you may pay $100 for a table. You're gonna pay another $30 for power. Most of them you're gonna bring your own table, your own lights, your own chairs. It does add up. You're gonna want to bring your own lights. I'm happy to help, Bruce. You guys have any other questions?
How long did it take for your confidence to kick in before you know your cabs were good enough to sell? And tell us about how you began to learn cabbing by Eric.
So Eric, I started learning when I was like 6, 7 years old. And my story was not the greatest because no matter how bad my work was, people would tell me that it was really good. Probably because I worked in my dad's store. So I was always very confident in my work, even when I knew it was less than it should be. And I think people really get self-conscious because when you cut a cab, you're gonna see more flaws than anybody else. Like if you picked up any cab on this table, I could tell you where every flaw in the cab was. 99% of people would never see a flaw in most of these. And that's just because they don't cut stones. So you really got to remember that when someone that cuts cabs is going to be a lot more critical of someone that just wants a pretty piece of jewelry. And the other thing that really gave me confidence is that I would see what other people were selling and I'd go, that is absolute garbage. If people are happy buying that, then I know they're going to be happy buying this. And if you go out to a show and you look at a lot of people that, they cut really low end stuff, you're going to go, wow, I'm doing pretty good. I don't like to compare people, but it is a confidence boost when you see what some other people will cut and what you cut. So, and everybody starts somewhere. Yes, every cab on this table, I guarantee there's a flaw somewhere. Thanks, Robert. You're very welcome. Happy to help. Most people would never find a flaw on them, though. You might, if you cut cabs, you might pick them up and go, what the hell was he thinking on this cab? 99% of people will go, wow, that's beautiful. And that's what you got to remember is that you are your worst critic. So you're going to be the hardest on yourself. And you should strive for excellence. I'm not saying do a bad job. I'm just saying that most people will never see the flaws. And I learned this as a little kid. I'd polish an agate and it would look horrible, and people would tell me it looked beautiful. And I'd be like, wow, you have no idea what good polish looks like. And so that's what really my confidence came from, is that I was like, I know I can polish something and it'll be better than what most people will expect. So what I like to transport if I can figure out how to move this thing. To transport, I got these cases. These are from Johnson Brothers Lapidary. They just resell stuff, but this is the best price that I found on these. And I had these tall ones here that hold 24 trays. They are very heavy if you fill up these big ones. So if you have to lift this anywhere, including out of the back of a truck, keep that in mind. If I was going to buy them again, I would buy more of these ones that only hold 12 trays because they're easier to transport. But these are hard shell aluminum cases, and I would stack up. You can see that in this picture, all the stacks of trays right there. I would stack these full. I do have a different setup for outdoor shows, but I got away from doing outdoor shows. I decided that I really hated doing the outdoor shows, and I'd much rather pay more to be inside and where I can have a nice setup and be comfortable. But if I'm doing an outdoor show, the biggest changes that I'm going to make is nothing can be blown away. So I'm not putting business cards out on the table unless there's like a rock or something on them. I'm taking a very heavy duty. I actually used a carport as a tent, but very heavy duty tent. And I would take a big outdoor rug to reduce the dust. So I'd lay out a rug inside my space so that when people were in my booth, they were in the shade, were standing on a rug, and I would set up a chair, and sometimes I'd even set up a fan for them. If you set up a chair and a fan, yeah, well, I didn't go that far, Eric, but a lot of times you'll see that you'll have a couple that goes to a show together. One of them does not want to be there. They're there to support their spouse, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. And the other one wants to look at rocks. So if you have a nice space for them to sit and be quiet, they're much less complainy about we need to go, my feet hurt, if they can sit in the shade, than if they're standing there waiting for their partner to be done. So you should make it comfortable. Yeah, and when I do an outdoor show, I would stake those things down. I would take buckets of rock and put them in every corner and cargo strap it down so they were extremely heavy. Exactly, Daniel. Eric, that's a good idea. Although most of the shows I did, I was under the age of 21, so I guess not most, a good chunk of them though. Yeah, you
Michael
want,
Brown had a question. Sorry, go ahead, Zeke.
I was just saying, you just want people to be comfortable. Go ahead.
All right, so Michael Brown had a question earlier. So it's difficult to get vendor space in established shows in his area, often a wait list. Are there any other outlets to sell materials? Smaller craft shows rarely have lapidary crowd.
So that's one thing to take into consideration. What do you sell that you're going to take to that show? If you're going to sell rough rock, you probably don't want to go to a quilt show. If you have jewelry, it's going to do much better at a quilt show, although that's not the ideal space. I'm just using it as an example. You can do fairs. Generally, though, I would get on as many wait lists as you possibly can. I guarantee in June in the Western United States, you could be on 10 different wait lists every weekend for, a show. That's also, I was talking about having let me go back to this picture, doing uh, what was I thinking? Where you're I've completely lost the word. Demonstrating, where you're demonstrating at the show. So like in this picture, thank you, Thomas. If you look at this sphere machine got me into this show and it got me the best space in this show because I was willing to bring it and setting it up. So if you have anything you can demonstrate, even if it's just sitting there wire wrapping, it adds value and you're more likely to get into a show doing that. So it's something to consider. It helps a lot when you have something to demonstrate. One of the other things that when I was doing is when I'm applying for a show, I will send them pictures of the prettiest things that I have, and excuse me, and that'll help get their attention to see if they want me in their show or not. You know, I'd been doing shows in Utah for many years, and there's still shows where I got rejected every year as a dealer. They had somebody else that they'd rather be in there. But I would just get on the waiting list of every one of those shows. And one of the other things that you can offer to do is have all of your stuff ready for that particular show. And you tell the show coordinator, if you have somebody drop out last minute, I will fill in. If you give me a couple hours notice, I can be set up. There were many shows where someone did not show up the morning of the show, and there was a 2-year wait list to get on this show. And because I was willing to be there within a few hours, I got into the show and set up. And which is why I talk about it's important to have your show set up very convenient to set up. What you guys see here is there's realistically probably $70,000 in inventory here, and all the cabs and all the spheres. I can set all of this up in an hour. So, but that's being able to do it quickly is very important. It makes it your life so much easier, and it's well worth investing in the stuff that you need to make it go quickly. Yes, Eric, that's retail cost. You guys are so funny. Yeah, and you know, that's also why I tell you guys that like sometimes I had an unfair advantage because I grew up in my dad's store. So my situation is not the same as everybody, especially if you're just getting into it. You know, there's people like Terry has been coming to my dad's store since what, before I was born. And you know, he knew who I was before I really knew anything about rocks. Yeah, 70,000 in retail. If you sold everything at retail cost, that's what it would be about there. I did not have $70,000 invested into what you see here. Because some of these trays add up quickly. You got a tray that every stone in there is $100. It can add up really fast. And on that note, while we're talking about getting into shows, one of the things that I see a lot is dealers get tired and they pack up and go home early. I will always stay until the show coordinator says it's time to go home. You show coordinators, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of hard work. It's very disappointing if you have people coming for the last half an hour of the show and half the dealers are gone. Stay until the end of the show. Yeah, exactly, Denise. My sister, as Terry was just talking about, runs a fairly large show in Utah, and people get kicked out every year for leaving early. It's rude, it's unprofessional. The only time is acceptable if you have an emergency. Any other time, you're there to work. This is not play. I mean, unless this is a hobby for you, in which case it is play. But for me, it's work, it's a job. That's true, Eric. You can make a lot of. There's shows where the last 2 hours where I made all my money. Yes, it does, Ed. And I'll tell you, as someone who had to deal with my sister during a lot of those shows, it is not pleasant. Um, I'm sure Terry can attest too. So it puts a lot of stress on everybody, and it's much more professional if you. Yeah, Terry's laughing. Um, it's very professional if you stay to the end of the show, and it's much more likely to get you invited back again next year.
As
All
if
right,
we
so
have
Michael Welsh, sorry, raised um has his hand raised, so let's unmute Micah.
Hi, Micah. You gotta hit the unmute button.
Yeah, I was wondering, is this video going to be recorded so I could look at it later?
I believe so. That is a Darwin question though.
Yes, it would be recorded, and then we have a playlist on YouTube, where we upload all cut and chat replays, so it will be there as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. What other questions do you guys have? What other things can I shed light on or help with?
Wes has had a question earlier. A lot of shows seem to be selling more jewelry and less rough rock and slabs. Do you see that as a trend going forward?
I see that as an opportunity. That sounds like a great opportunity to have the monopoly on a show, where you're the only one there with the best rough rock and slabs to sell to people. There are people that are not going to buy rough rock and slabs. That's a different demographic. But there's a lot of people that go to shows and are disappointed that they don't see any rough rock or slabs there. I hear that all the time that, wow, this is very disappointing. There's nothing here that I want to buy. So there's definitely a customer for everybody out there. And I'm not saying every show that's going to be the case, but I would not let that deter you from doing rough rock shows. I actually prefer shows that are a little bit smaller and where I'm a bigger dealer at the show. Like if I go to Tucson, I'm not a big deal. Like nobody's going to know who I am. Nobody's going to be going to Tucson just to see me. But like that little church show that I just showed you a picture of, I mean, there's plenty of customers that know they're going to know me by name. They're going to come there just to see and buy from me. And that works out better for me than if I was at a show with much more people. So I would not let that deter you. I would do the show at least once and see how well it goes. Yeah, that's an excellent point, Bruce. One of the other things I wanted to discuss, that maybe you haven't thought about and you'll learn in a hurry if it happens. What happens when a customer asks for a refund? Or what happens when a customer breaks something, or creates an uncomfortable situation? Personally, I believe that you should always be prepared to handle those situations and decide what you're going to do in advance, because it's going to be a lot harder to make that decision when there's the stress of someone yelling at you. For me personally, if someone comes up and says, exactly, Denise, have a policy. If someone comes up and says, I just bought this from you and I decided I'm not happy with it, as a general rule, I'm just going to take it back, give them a refund. Now, you can't refund people to a different payment form. That's a scam that can happen to you. Let's say they pay with a card and they say, I want a refund, give me cash. That's money laundering. And they can go cancel the charge later and you're out twice. So you do have to be aware of that. Only refund to the payment form that they paid you with. But as a general rule, I'm just going to give them a refund. I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to sell it again in a minute, if I'm at a show, so it's not a problem. And I'd much rather just have that person be happy and go away than it disrupt my entire show. But that's something that you have to decide for yourself. I know people that have a very strict no return policy. And if you bring something back to them, they're like, no, you're at a show. You handled it. You saw it in person. You know what you got. You bought it. It's yours. Go away. It's just not my style. So I'd rather give them a refund. But that's something that you need to decide in advance. Another very common situation, if someone breaks something, how are you going to handle that? Do you know how to say, excuse me, you need to pay for that, you just broke it, or your kid just broke it? Or are you going to stand there with a stunned look on your face, go like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So that's why you need to decide ahead of time what your response is going to be. For me personally, that's one of the reasons I put the cheaper stones towards the front of the table. If a kid walks up and breaks it, as a general rule, I'm gonna let it go. It's not worth it for me to try to get some parent to pay for it, especially if you're at a small show. They probably don't have a lot of money. It's no big deal. Let it go. That's not everybody's policy. That's just my personal one. Now, if somebody walks up and picks up a $5,000 sphere and drops it, that's a different conversation. But I encourage touching, which is one of the other reasons that I don't make people pay for things that they accidentally break. I encourage people to pick things up, look at them, touch them, feel them. It gets people excited. So I encourage that, which is also why I have that policy. Yeah, people generally don't read the signs anyway. That's a very good point. Do I give discounts or stay with a set price? We talked about this a little bit in the beginning. It depends on your pricing structure. It's something that you have to decide and come up with a pricing structure for. In the beginning, I had a very strict, I don't give discounts policy. This is what the price is. I figured out exactly what it costs, and this is what I need to sell it for. And I discovered if I raised my prices a little bit and gave people a discount, they were actually much happier. So now, like if I'm going to a show, I have room to give a discount on almost anything at the show. There's still exceptions. I still maybe there's one sphere where the rough cost me so much, I just don't have the room to give a discount. And I'm going to tell people, I'm like, I have a lot invested in this. I can't give a discount on this piece. It's a very unusual, unique piece. If you want to buy it, this is the price. Otherwise, I'm going to keep it. And on flashier things, like generally I always take something to the show that's going to grab people's attention that I don't expect to sell. And that's going to be one of those items that I just don't give a discount on. And if someone wants it, they're going to pay that price for it. And you'll sell it eventually. But it's what you expect and what you set the expectation to be. Bruce, it depends on the customer. Generally, I go a lot off of gut feeling. If I believe the customer is not coming back, I probably won't leave it behind the counter very long. But I was in Tucson once as a dealer, and I had a gentleman from New York who owned a jewelry store. I had no idea who he was. Walked up to my table and said, "I will take everything." He wanted every cabochon that I had. And I was like, haha, yeah, right. And he's like, "I will be back in a few hours. Please have everything ready for me." And I was like, okay. And I packed up everything, put a price on it, and he showed up a few hours later with the biggest stack of cash I had currently ever seen in my life. So as a general rule, if someone asks me to hold something, I will hold it. But you got to go on your gut on that, and it depends on how much you have to sell at the show. Personally, I know I've asked people to hold stuff, and I was like, maybe I don't have my wallet on me. And I'm like, I really want to buy this, but my wallet's in the car. Will you hold this for me? And you're gonna hear that a lot. Most of the people won't show up again, but it's that 1 in 1,000 customer that buys everything on your table. Yeah, that's a good policy, Jimmy. If you're not back by this time, I'm gonna put it out again. Generally, my time frame is if I've got a 3-day show, someone asks me to hold it on Friday, it's going back out Saturday morning if they haven't come back in yet. Yeah, that's very smart, Bruce. Give people a time frame. That's really good. Setting people's expectations is very important. Um, it really helps everybody know what's going on. So telling somebody, yes, I will hold this for you, but I'm only giving you 30 minutes. If you're not back in 30 minutes, it's going back out on the table. Sets a really good expectation that you got 30 minutes to run to your car and grab your wallet. If you really want it, I'll see you in the next 20 minutes because you're going to be sprinting to your car to get it. And if they're not coming back in that 30 minutes, they probably weren't ever really going to come back. Or they may tell you, "I really appreciate that you're giving me 30 minutes. I actually need an hour and a half to go home and get my wallet. Can you wait that long?" And if someone said that to me, I'd be much more inclined to give them more time. So just setting that expectation, because then they also set the expectation that it's gonna take them longer than that 30 minutes. Oh, there you go, Terry. That works. But it's worked out both ways for me, and I tend to be more relaxed about it. But I also knew what to expect, so I was okay if they didn't show back up. And then we talked about theft. I would encourage everybody, if you see somebody steal at your booth, you can verbally address it. I would never physically address it. People tend to get very hot-headed. You may spend maybe you spent 4 hours making a piece of jewelry, and somebody puts it in their pocket and you see them. I may say, hey, please take that back out of your pocket, or I'll call security. If they don't, I would never get physically involved. It's not worth it. It's gonna be much harder on your life if you try to physically take it back than if you just take the loss. So, my personal belief. And yes, it's good to know your security. And yes, anything you sell, you're pretty much gonna pay taxes on. I like the way you think, Joseph, but not worth the lawsuit. We're back to the needing liability insurance and what are the rules on your policy. But anytime you sell anything, I think the limit is if it's under $600 for a year. I don't think you have to file tax. Now, I'm not a CPA. I don't know the tax law. I'm just guessing based on what I've heard. But if I believe that if you sell less than $600 in a calendar year, you don't have to report it to the IRS. That is what I believe. I have no idea if that's fact or not, and even if Eric says I'm correct, I'm still not going to say that that's fact. And that's also could be different from state to state. And then you also have your sales tax that you're going to pay. And if you take a whole bunch of cash and don't report it, it's going to look very, very suspicious. I did $9 at this show on credit card, walking out with a much lighter case. A lot of shows, especially bigger shows, at least in Utah, the tax commission will walk around and they'll notice if you sell a bunch of stuff and didn't report it. You may get audited if you do that. So I would get more adequate tax advice if you're really going to get serious about selling rocks. I am not a CPA. I don't know the tax laws, especially not for the entire country. So learn about the taxes before you get started. It also is one of the reasons I like things like Square, where you can run everything through one system, and it makes it really easy. Exactly, Daniel. That sounds horrendous. I'm glad I didn't do shows in New Mexico. Yeah, Thomas actually, Thomas, remind me who you work for again. I can't remember the name of it. But Thomas works with small businesses to get them started. I have not done the actual research, but Thomas and I were talking about setting up something where you guys could help get started a national association for self-employed. Yes, thank you. To get started in your own business. So I've been meaning to talk to Thomas more about this. That's been a lack on my part, not Thomas's. To get that something going for you guys where we can help you get set up. Because one of the things is, my goal when I was on my own was to sell rock, and I'd make cabochons, make spheres, and that my goal was to sell those and to continue growing my business. Now that I work for John and Sherman, one of my big goals is to help you guys grow your businesses. And I want to help you guys. I want to help you grow. I want you to help you learn. I want you guys to have big, successful businesses, if that's what you choose you want. So that's awesome that Thomas is offering that to us. So I will talk to him more about that. I do not charge customers credit card fees. feels tacky to me to add 3%. It's so much easier to just factor that into your cost of doing business than to tell somebody it's 3% more than what you put on the rock. So for me personally, I'm just going to account for that in the cost and when I'm figuring my pricing. Yes, exactly. Raise your prices 3% is so much better. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Is it's better to just raise your prices 3% than to tell a customer, all right, it's $10 plus 3%. If you're using Square, it's only like 30 cents plus 2.9% to take a credit card. So my minimum was $5 to take a card. That's because a lot of vendors don't charge sales tax because they're just doing business under the table. And you can tell and I've told customers this. I'm sure there's people out there not paying their taxes. But it is not, I'm required to collect sales tax and pay the government. So I can't not charge you sales tax unless you have a wholesale license. I've never seen Square add 3% to the sale. They're gonna charge you 3%, but if you put $10 into your Square to charge it, it's not gonna add 3% to that. It's just gonna take 3% out of that. And that's the way to go too, Thomas. And that's what I did for cash sales. Is for me personally, if I did cash sales, I was just accounting for that in the cost of that. But if I'm taking a card, I am gonna charge them the sales tax because it's easy to collect it, and that way I don't have to deal with coinage to get down to the correct amount. So that's a good way to do that. Oh, I do remember I can't remember if that was law or some policy that the credit card companies came out with where the that you couldn't add on top because it was deterring people from using a card. I have heard that. I don't know if anybody's ever gotten in trouble for that. And I don't know if that's law or if that's just credit card companies' policy. So I agree with Eric. I would look into that personally, but it's just going to deter people from buying from you if it feels like a hidden fee. And so people are not going to enjoy that experience of, well, now there's an extra 3%. So that's how I look at it, is not necessarily how I'm going to charge people, but how it feels when you're charging people. And it's much better to just account for it, and they're going to be happier for that way anyway. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I like Square, is because you can take cash sales in Square as well. Exactly. I would not charge $9.99 versus $10, especially if I did not use a receipt printer. All of the receipts were digital. Especially if you're at a show, because then you're gonna end up someone is gonna want their penny. And then you have to carry around coins. So every sale I did was rounded to the whole dollar. And then that's just the way I priced everything, is that there was never any change. It's not worth it to take coins to a show. Yeah, when my dad had his store in Salt Lake, we just flat out wouldn't take American Express at all. I don't know the legality of that, but that was when I was a little kid. because they would charge us so much higher that it wasn't worth it for us to take their card. Yep, online's the same at a show. Although if you're talking about pricing, Kirsten, I wouldn't go 99. I'd go like 997. Because that feels like a different price, or 996. 994. That feels different to people than 999. But still, as a general rule, I just price it as $10. It's psychologically, people will associate the 999 with a cheaper price, but most people will know that it's still $10. So personally, I know some people still do that. Exactly, Daniel. I do the same thing. If somebody prices something $9.99, I would just say $10 in my head. Yeah, you do want to bring change, lots of ones, fives, tens, and I'd even take 20s and 50s, because people would, you're always going to get that one person that wants to buy $10 worth of stuff and pay with $100 bill. So I would take all of it and just plan on accommodating it. Yep, Square takes debit cards. Exactly, Terry. Square is a credit card processing company. What's great about it is you can download an app on your phone. You can buy a card reader that, well, actually now you can actually just process the cards as tap to pay, but you can buy a card reader that plugs into your phone and take cards. Yep, I've been handed counterfeit money plenty of times. And I suggest that everybody that's going to do a show and take cash, you should get on YouTube and watch a video on how to distinguish without a pen, how to determine the difference between a real and a fake bill. Because I think there's like 100 different ways, but if you can remember 3 of them, you're going to be fine 99% of the time. They do not charge different rates for American Express or Visa. It's the same 30 cents a transaction plus 3%. And I don't know if Square is the best one. That's just the one that I used. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about is all the things that you're going to forget to take to a show. You need to put together a bin, a tote, however you're going to take it to a show and use it, and never take that stuff out of it, of all the things that you're always going to forget to take to a show. You're going to forget a scale. You're going to forget pens. You're going to forget tablecloths. You're going to forget probably all the things I'm forgetting right now. You're going to need bags. I cannot tell you how many people go to a show and don't think about how the customer is going to take the item away. And you see customers walking away with handfuls of stuff because that dealer didn't bring a bag, a box, something to put it in. Think about your packaging. The customer has to walk away with one item. What is it going in? A black light. I used to take 5 card readers to a show, even if I was going by myself, just so that I knew there was at least one where I could find it when I needed it. Because I tend to set stuff down and forget about it. I'd take 3 scales. I'd always take tables, lights, chairs, tablecloths, a black light, a flashlight, some form of packaging, pens, markers, calipers is really good, screwdriver, safety pins, tape, staplers, Ziploc bags, spray bottles for water. Exactly, all kinds of great stuff. Make a big list, put it all in one bin. Don't ever take it out of that bin unless you're going to a show. You should have a dedicated scale to take to shows. You should have all that kind of stuff. I really am. In fact, you know how I know that you're gonna forget all that stuff? Because every show I've ever done, I've forgotten at least 5 of those things. So for me personally, how I combated that problem is everything I would take to shows went into its packaging and its roll around cases, its carts, its totes, whatever it was going in, and it did not leave that space until I took it out at the next show. For me, I would sell the cabochons. For instance, so let's say somebody wanted a bulk price on cabochons. Well, I price everything by the gram. So instead of adding up each price on the back, I would take all their cabochons and put them on the scale and give them the best price I could based on the weight. Some people just want to know the weight. Some people are going to walk up and say, well, it's $10, but how many grams is it? And you're going to go, I don't know. I priced it at home. So bring a scale. The other reason to bring a scale is that 5 other people at the show you're going to attend also forgot a scale, and you'll be their new best friend if you let them borrow yours. So I would be that one person walking around. Does anybody have a scale I can borrow? Because I would always forget it. For money, depending on the size of the show, I would generally keep my pockets fairly empty. In my front right pocket, I would keep 20s, 50s, and 100s. In my front left pocket, I would keep 10s. My back right pocket, I keep 5s. And my back left pocket, I keep 1s. Or some variation of that. And that is for smaller shows, that's how I did it. That's also how I would buy when I go to Tucson. If I'm doing a show where I'm handling way more cash than can fit in my pocket, then I'm putting a lockbox inside of a tote behind the booth where I can, or on a table, however I'm setting it up to be at that show. I don't ever like money to just be in a place where it's clearly visible. So I would often put it underneath the table rather than on a table behind the show so that people couldn't see it, out of sight, out of mind. So it's just one of the personal peeves. I'd do that. But a lot of dealers will just take an extra table and set it up behind their booth. And that's what they would lay out, they'd have their lockbox and all their things that they need. The downside to doing that is if you do what I talked about earlier, where you let people come behind your booth, is if your cash is just laying out on a table or in a lockbox behind the table, on a table behind your booth, they can also grab that. So I like to keep cash close. Exactly. My tags, as a general rule, I never tell people what I'm pricing the rock by per gram. Because if you think about the customer, most people that, a silversmith that wants to make a ring, they don't care about the gram weight, or why it's priced that way, as long as they're getting a good deal. So if somebody asks, I would tell them what it was, but I would never just say these are $2 a gram because people don't understand grams. If I said, how big is 1 gram, most people have absolutely no idea. So as a general rule, I wouldn't even discuss grams with customers unless they're a dealer that really wants to know and that they're trying to buy in bulk so they can resell and they got to figure out that gram price. It's just going to say $40 on the back of it. Because people don't care. My dad would do that all the time. He would put this tray is $2 a gram on something. And they'd be like, well, what's a gram? How much is two? Oh, that's a $50 stone. I'm so confused. I thought it said $2 a gram. How big is a gram? And so that's why I don't tell people anything about grams. I just put a price on it. I wouldn't put the gram weight on there. That's why I took the scale. I'm averaging it out, Josh. So let's say I'm cutting one tray of cabs at a time. In that tray, there's 50 stones. It takes me 5 hours. Now figure out what's the total amount of grams and how much you want to make an hour, and then figure out how much that is a gram. I mean, I never really did it that way, but if I was going to tell somebody to calculate it, that's what I would do. So if I was doing a bulk sale, I'd only weigh them in bulk if if they were buying a lot of one stone. Uh, so like if they were getting like that tray of thulite you guys saw, if they wanted to buy that entire tray of thulite, I know how much that tray of thulite costs. I mean, that tray, I think I was charging at the time $4 a gram for that thulite, for those cabs. So I could take those, put them on the scale. All right, punch in $4 a gram. That's how much that would be retail. Excuse me. Now I can figure out what the best deal price is. See, and the reason, Daniel, I price by the gram is because I tended to overprice cabochons when I priced them by the piece. I would look at a cab and think that should be a $50 cab. And if I priced it out to what I thought was a fair gram price, it may have only been a $40 cab. So that's why I priced them all as at a standard price so that they were fair across the board. Yep, there 1 gram is 5 carats. I think a dollar bill weighs a gram is another good example of how little a gram is. Oh, thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. And that's something to take into consideration is how good is your work. If you're cutting sloppy, really fast cabs, you don't need to charge as much if you're putting the time into each piece. And also, like, when I say I charge like $4 a gram, that sounds expensive, but a dime-sized cab still may only be $20. It's just a fair way of me finding an even price across the board. So Martha, to answer your question, I'm grading stones before I determine a price. So let me use like dinosaur bone cabs as an example. You have extreme highs and lows in dinosaur bone. So when I'm going to price it, I'm going to sort it into 3 piles. The very best, good, and the worst of the tray. Whether they can all be good cabochons, but that's how I'm going to sort it. And the top may be $5 a gram, the middle may be $3 a gram, and the bottom may be $1 a gram. And that way you're still fair across the board, but that's the way of consistently doing it and how I did it. But when you have something like that tray of thulite, where it's the same quality across the entire tray, and all it is now is based on the size of the stone, then it's a fair way to price it. Yep, you're determining color. If I did a bad job on a cabochon, I may put it in a lower pile, even though it's a good quality piece. I may put it in one of the lower piles just because I don't like the cut. So there's a lot of ways to grade stones. That might be an interesting chat we do with you guys one night, how we grade rock, from rough rock to the cabochons to spheres. So because there's a lot that goes into it to opal. I don't do a lot with opals. I mean, I can tell you a little bit, but not a ton with opal. Yes, I'll give you a good example. The Labradorite that I had probably 6 different price points for Labradorite, from $1 a gram to $10 a gram, depending on the quality. The very, very best, where you get that like electric, vibrant purple, they've got a good cut, no fractures, they're going to go into that top category. a common green Labrador with okay flash and an average cut is going to go to the very bottom. And I just don't sell cabs if they're shitty. I mean, if they're really poorly cut, not good quality, it's just not something I want to deal with. I try not to. If I have 3 trays of Labrador that are all different price points, I try to keep them as separate trays so that they're easy for people to distinguish and see the quality difference. But if I have 3 mostly empty trays, then I'll put them all together. Which is why I price each cab on the back so I can quickly, it's that way I'm not trying to go, oh, is that an A or is that a B? That's awesome, Daniel. That is way cool. Well, awesome. Do you guys have any other questions, things that I can help with?
I think we skipped one question from Kristen up top. How do you deal with someone who wants to argue about the price?
Don't argue with them. Tell them I'm sorry you feel that way. Please leave my booth. That's where it goes back to where we were talking about policy earlier. You're not gonna please everybody. I've done shows where someone has walked up and told me I'm the most expensive they've ever seen, and it's totally ridiculous. They can't believe my prices, and laughed in my face for what I had on a cab. And then 5 minutes later, I've had somebody walk up and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how cheap this cab is," and they'll buy it right away. They won't even ask for a discount. So you're not gonna please everybody. Somebody is gonna get upset about your price. You're gonna have people have rude comments, complain, say rude things. It's just part of doing business. You just can't let it bother you. Exactly. So if someone was standing at my booth and yelling at me, I'd tell them to leave. Oh, I think it is a boiler in the basement that heats that. But honestly, I have no idea. That is a very good question, Darwin. When someone asks a question out of the chat and I do not read the question, I just answer. Will they know what I'm answering to, or will they just hear my response and not be able to see where they typed out the question?
Yep, they will only be able to hear your response and not be able to see the question. So what we can do is we can put together like an FAQ after the show, like a show notes of all the questions that were asked, and then send that out to everyone as a summary of the questions that were asked and the answers that you provided.
Oh, okay. On that note, I will apologize that I did not realize that. And I will try to be better about reading your guys' questions when I answer them so that when you watch these later, you will know what I'm talking about. This is my own personal question. When doing shows, would you bring a wow piece that's more expensive and that you don't necessarily expect to sell and bring it to hook attention? Yes. I always bring something that's going to bring people's attention that I have zero faith in selling at that particular show. And sometimes you will sell that piece and you're going to be sad about it, but you're going to put a price on there that you will be happy if it sells, and you're not going to discount that price unless you really want to sell it. So like, let me share my screen again. Yes. Can you see the picture?
We're seeing your desktop, Zeke.
Oh, okay. Let me try that again. This is why I have tech savvy people here to help me. All right, now can you see the picture?
Here we go.
All right, so in this particular picture, if you look here, there is a 7-inch Kabambi sphere. I did never expected to sell that at this show. I'd have been blown away if I had sold this at this show, but it always caught people's attention. And if you look right here, you'll see this piece of Labradorite. That piece of Labradorite had the best purple flash. It was a wonderful display piece. And I would use that to get people excited about the Labradorite so that they'd go buy a cabochon. But I put a price on that I never expected it to sell, and it did not sell at this show. So, but I always take something that grabs somebody's attention, something big and flashy like this. But as a general rule, if you do your booth right, the whole booth will grab somebody's attention. Like a whole tray of, like the whole table of cabochons like this, and then having the bright lights will attract people to your tables. So if you set it up right, good coloring, it really grabs people. People will gravitate towards your tables. But yeah, there's a couple pieces here, like this big Kabambi sphere and this piece of Labradorite, that are only there to grab people's attention. This piece of Labradorite you can't see from this picture, but as you were walking by the table from this direction, that flash would catch your eye, and it was almost impossible to ignore because it was so bright. That is Hannah. That was on my desktop. I didn't make the jewelry that she was wearing in that picture. Um, Jim Bizak actually made that set for her. Problems with stealing. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate the reminder. Read them out loud. Do I have problems with people stealing? Yes, people are going to steal stuff the way I have my booth set up. But the reason I have it set up that way is I want people to be able to touch the cabochons, look at them. I want them to feel welcome to touch them, because I sell a lot more that way, and I sell a lot more than I would lose if I so I told this a little bit earlier, but when I had covers on all of the cabochons, I sold a significant amount less of them because people couldn't pick them up and look at them, and they didn't want to ask for permission to take the lids off. So by just having them all open, I just know that I'm going to have theft, but I'm selling more, so I'm okay with it. Oh, you're funny, Terry. What are your favorite shows over here in the Western states? Well, I am a little bit biased. My sister, the Crystal Barista, that's not her name, that's the name of her business, runs some large shows in Utah, and she started expanding to Nevada, Colorado. Those were some of my favorite, but I can't, it's an unfair home field advantage. This what I tell people as a general rule, my favorite shows are the smaller shows where I feel like a bigger dealer than I really am, because I actually do better at those shows. So when you're looking at shows, people tend to shy away from the small shows because they think, I'm going to go to Tucson and I'm going to sell everything I make. But it costs a lot of money. Like, so that show that I was just showing you guys, the picture of my booth, I think that booth was like $80, maybe been 120, something in that price range. It was 20 minutes from my house, and I'd sell $3,000 to $5,000 worth of stuff in 2 days set up at that show. On the side note, if I had gone to Tucson, the last time I did Tucson, we paid $2,500 for a hotel for 3 weeks. We paid $5,000 for a 10 by 10 booth space. I think we paid $300 in electricity to have lights at the booth. We also had to pay to have food for 3 weeks in Tucson during their busy season. And you get driving from Utah to Tucson, Salt Lake City down to Tucson, that's a 14-hour drive. That show, even though my overall number is bigger, what I look at when I'm doing a show is the percentage. So if I can exactly, if I can go to a show and keep my cost really low, but I have a really high percentage compared to what my booth costs and how much the total show costs, I'm much happier with that than if I have to spend $10,000-$15,000 to make $20,000. So I'd much rather do a small local show than a big show like Tucson. And that might be different if I was taking $100,000 specimens, but like the cabochons that you guys see on that table, I'd say the average price is probably like $25 for small, inexpensive material. I know on that table I had cabs that were $500, but there were very few of those compared to $15, $20, $25 cabochons. Awesome. You guys have any other questions? That was kind of a lot of information. Well, see, Eric, the reason I put the cheap cabs in the front and the expensive cabs in the back is that it's harder to reach all the way across and steal from the back. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. Were most of your cabs going to wire wrappers? The majority of cabochons I was selling were to wire wrappers and silversmiths. I probably sold more to silversmiths than to wire wrappers, but there was a lot of both. What was the ratio freeforms to calibrated? Probably a 50-50 mix. Ah, you guys are very welcome, and thank you. And it's so nice to hang out with you guys. And I have a little treat for you guys that Joanna put together for us. Joanna put together for us. She found some pictures of John set up at Tucson and the Agate show. And so why don't we play that slide of pictures of John at the show? I was like, man, that takes you back. Very old school vibe. Oh, slow down. Let's go back one. Got to start us at the beginning. But this is very old school to have the crates on the table. You got these low lamps. I hate these lamps. They wash out the color too much and they're too much of a distraction right in the view. And if you look in the back, these are really cool cases that John made to hold the spheres. And that's really takes you back. And then in the front here, you got these bins with the slabs in there. I like the old Highland Park sign, 2011. Man, I was just a little kid, only a few years into Lapidary when this show took place. All right, now we can move to the next one. That's a really cool idea, Terry. Anybody that's doing a show should take a picture of their booth, and the next time we do one of these cut and chats like this, we'll show our other people's booths and we can talk about them. Look at all these agate specimens laid out. You got the old school back when Highland Park was real new. You can see the thin line, the precision blade, and the green line blade in the back there. You got this nice. This actually, I think this little saw right here is no, okay, that is a 12-inch. I thought that was maybe one of Tay's 10-inch ones. That was really cool. I love all the agate specimens too. Look how young John looks. Gosh. I have no idea what show this is. 2020. I didn't even realize they did a show in 2020 or Tucson in 2020. You can see one of the very first CB8 sitting here on the table. You can see the core drill sitting in the back. Lots of agate specimens in here. Has such cool memory. This is Kino. Yeah, you're right. That other one probably was too, because he's got the same tables back there. You're right. All right, we can go to the next one. I like the big pieces of Pinolith too. Well, awesome. Thank you, everybody. It's so wonderful to hang out with you guys and show you all the fun stuff. Before we go, I'm going to screen share one more time and show everybody all the pictures that I had of stuff. A lot of these we just skipped over, so we'll start at the beginning here. This is one of the shows I did. This was 2022. Some honeycomb onyx cabs. You can see this is some what they call Mexican Tiffany stone, but that's just fluorite. If you look right here, these are actually phosphosiderite cabs in this corner right here. Somebody was asking if they actually several people were asking if it takes a good polish. Those are some of the phosphosiderite cabs that I did. Then this is a picture. This is the Crystal Festival in Utah. This is my sister's show. Nice tray of blue labradorite cabs. Some nice little Jimmy chrysoprase cabs. This is the peach opal from Terry's Claim. Then we got fluorite and quartz from Brazil, some charoite, some emerald, lapis. I like the little plume agate there. This is the logo that I designed myself, if you cannot tell. That's that picture we're just looking at. This is a Laguna agate sphere. It's not finished in this video. It still needs, I had to take it back to get some of these scratches out. But that's a killer little Laguna. I actually bought the rough on this on the live sale before John hired me. Some turquoise cabs. This is in my dad's garage. This was I used to set up and sell out of my dad's garage all the time. People would come over, hang out, buy stuff. Oh, this is a fun little video. This is one of the Instagram videos I did. Try to catch people's attention. Those two agates in the bottom there, or the top, were off that same piece that I cut the sphere out of. But some polished agates. Yeah, this Laguna right here, that's off that same one that the sphere was from. And this is the other end. So really beautiful piece. I think I still have the end cut of this polish, but I sold the sphere. And then there's that beautiful Koyamito pseudomorph tray of thulite cabochons. And then back to my dad's garage. Showed you guys that picture, and that is all that I had ready for tonight. Well, awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. It's so wonderful to hang out with you guys. Before we go, I am curious, what do you guys want to do for the next cut and chat? We really haven't come up with a plan yet. How to grade rock. That could be fun. Vibratory tumbler, that could be interesting. All right, well, let me talk to John about see if he can attend, because he would be much better at grading rock than I would be. But that would be fun. I think it'd also be fun to do grading cabochons and spheres. We could also talk about tumbling, rough pointers. Okay. You know, that actually might be a really good video cut and chat as well. Grading rock and talking about like how would I cut this rock? How do I know I can make money off of this piece? Because that's something that I had to learn the hard way. I cut a lot of rock to know, am I going to make money on this? Am I going to break even? Am I going to be able to sell these? And there was rocks that I spent a lot of money on the rock, put a lot of effort into it, and did not make any money. I sold the cabs for less than what the entire thing cost me. So it's definitely a learning curve. So that'd be fun to talk about as well. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. It's so much fun to talk about these. A lot of fun memories thinking about the shows and talking about doing with these. I'm sad John was not here because I bet he would have enjoyed looking at those pictures too. It would have been a good memory for him. And
Sorry, Zeke, are we spinning the wheel?
we can do a final spin. I do not have any lots. Why don't we spin the wheel and whoever wins, we'll send them a pound of Alamejo agates.
All right, let's spin.
I did not bring any lot bins home with me tonight. That's funny, Peter. Gary, is Gary in the room? Put something in the chat, Gary. Awesome, Gary's here. Well, Gary, I don't have anything to show you because I went home to do this with you guys tonight. And we will send you a pound of Alamejo, I guess. That'll be fun for you to cut. How much room needed for the sphere machine, the small one, and which one to begin on? Let me screen share again. And we will look at, oh, whoops, almost left the meeting. Look at me pressing the wrong button again. Let's see, let me come over here and figure out where my mouse is. You can all see my terrible typing skills. Let's go over to sphere machines. So the standard sphere machine, this one that I just clicked on, this is going to be the beginner small machine. This is the machine that I would use for doing the final polish because it spins slowly. The very easy to use. You just got it. Basically, the hardest part about using this machine is adjusting these to get this so that it's level, which is actually something that I can show you guys in a video. That would be a fun one to do because it's very easy to do. But very easy machine to use. The hardest part about making the spheres is actually making your preforms. So you got to decide if you're going to invest in the shaping machine, a core drill, or if you're going to cut them on a saw. But you're $1,300. You do have to buy the sphere cups. It does not come with any sphere cups. This machine is about 2 by 2 by 2 feet, would be a rough guess on it. So it's very small. You can stick it on a desk and use it. Great little machine. The next one up from there is going to be the high-speed sphere machine. This machine right here, this one is 4 by 4 by 4 feet. So it's a big jump in size. You can actually do the same size spheres on this machine and as in the last machine. This machine is entirely designed to go faster, not to do bigger. So that's the goal with this machine. This is probably the easiest one to use, but it is a bigger space and it does go a lot faster. Then I will show you our final sphere machine. This is the hydraulic sphere machine. I don't know the dimensions on this one. It is absolutely massive. You can do up to 24-inch sphere in here. So just monster of a sphere machine. This is, you got hydraulics to run this one. Really cool machine. This is definitely, I haven't got to play with one of these yet, but it's on my list. So, but if you're just starting out and getting into it, I would I would get the low speed sphere machine. Zeke, you mentioned 4 different pieces of equipment for my 6-inch rainbow polish. What were they? Thank you. 4 different pieces. You'll have to send me an email, Carol. I'm not sure what you mean. Yeah, I'm buying cups to do during the belt sander. Are you talking about just to polish flat faces? So for polishing flat pieces, you have the wet belt sander is a good option. You're going to be running along the belt there to polish your flat face. You're limited on size. Generally, it's going to be good for things up to 4 to 6 inches, but ideal for that like 2 to 3 inch range. The back plate is really nice. Then you're gonna have the rotary flat lap. That's where you're gonna put the magnetic diamond plates on a flat face. That's gonna give you the best flat polish. If you want it to be perfectly flat, that's definitely the option to go with. The R1M is also a really good flat polish, and it's really easy to get a mirror polish in that machine. But it's a very big machine, so you have to have a lot of space to do it, and it's designed for doing production. And then the fourth machine, the only other machine that I can think of would be the bull wheel, and that's a dry sander. It's not one I recommend to beginners. It goes very fast, and you have to do it outside because it's dry, wearing a respirator. It's not a very hard machine to use, but it can be a little scary how fast it spins. Yeah, the wet belt sander is probably the way to go. Oh, the wet grinder. Yes, that is. Thank you, Edward. We also have the wet grinder. It is a handheld, very similar to like an angle grinder. But you use it. It runs with water, and you can put diamond pads on there to do polishing. Oh, that's interesting, Daniel. I'd like to see what you made. Oh, I'm so glad that you're enjoying the Idaho sunset, Terry. That's great to hear. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's so great to hang out with you guys. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review. We enjoy reading those. It makes our day. I have so much fun reading those, especially the which one was it? It was Better Than TV. That was hilarious. So, we enjoy those a lot. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you at the Rough Rock live sale tomorrow. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Take care.